that is one of the areas, and I will open that regulation thing, because just because something is natural does not mean that it is safe. That what we are looking at is that the usage for anything, whether it's microorganism, whether it's a natural substance, whether it's a chemical control, needs to be properly evaluated and needs to be understood in what is happening. These are things that are undertaken during the risk assessment that is being undertaken. The information is provided on that, and the fate and behavior of the microorganism is assessed and looked at. It's important that that is done, but what you will tend to find is that the microorganisms that we select, or that the companies that are producing these select, they look at the negative behaviors, because there are some very potent microorganisms out there that have unwanted, undesired side effects. Those are eliminated in the process of development, and they never are proposed to go to the market. What you are looking at, though, these things are coming from the natural environment. They are already in there, in the soil, or wherever they've been obtained from. And there is more tolerance in those areas, in the particular compartment that they came from, be it the plant or the soil component, and that is better understood. There can be a temporary increase in the population, but that then balances and settles out. If we look at something that is coming from a totally alien environment, there is more data is needed, more of an assessment, and a more thorough use is then put to that. And I look at things that have come from a deep sea vent in an ocean floor, or from the Antarctica, from ice thaws that are happening. Now that's a totally different environment, and more surety needs to be done on that, and to satisfy ourselves that we have got something that will behave in a predictable way and that we can move forward. So yes, they have an effect on biotic organisms, but we endeavor to understand those things before we do release those into the environment. I would answer that by the fact that in some crops and cropping environments, we're already doing that. So I think it is possible to do that. The problem that some growers have with that being achieved is that they may then not have the tools in case of an outbreak, in case of something unforeseen happening. So we need to be looking at how do we manage those expectations as we move forward. But I don't see it beyond the realms of possibility that plant protection chemical products become a thing of the past in many crops, at least. Maybe not all, and certainly the uptake and use in arable crops is a lot slower than in some of the other areas. But I'll draw your attention to a Crop North project where they've looked at 3 regimes. They've looked at a biological only set of treatments, they've looked at a chemical only set of treatments, and they've looked at an IPM system. And statistically speaking, there is no difference between the yields and the quality that they're getting off those different, differently managed forms of arable agriculture. I look at that there's a couple of problems here. One is that the source of the traditional plant protection products has not always had that information. They often don't have the time to dedicate towards looking at the actual problem as well. There is no doubt that using biocontrol techniques involves an understanding, a knowledge, and looking at what is there and interpreting that and looking at the control. It is easier at times to just reach for the prescription and give a chemical plant protection product. It's not always the best control for that. And what we have, there's been a disconnect at times, and that information flow with projects like the BET, the BET project, is providing that confidence, providing that information so that those advisors and people can do that. This is where we need to have more information. It's unfortunate that government bodies used to provide that service and would have been the ones that were very ideally set up to do that because they had that. The chemical companies have sort of moved along with that being removed, and it's been the providers of the products that have done that. I think we need to question that model, where that advice is coming from, and farmers need to be looking at getting advice. Member states should be providing this advice, making sure that that exists. It's part of the Sustainable Use Directive that a member state of the EU has to provide that information. It has to make sure it's available. So we've got a lot of work to do, but that needs to be corrected.